In the pitch-black night above the Indian Ocean, thousands of feet in the air, a Boeing 747 suddenly catches fire. Due to smoke, the breath of the 140 passengers aboard the plane begins to choke, and screaming, they desperately try to run towards the other part of the plane to escape the fire. The pilot in the cockpit is trying to somehow bring the plane to a small island in the middle of the ocean. But that island is quite far from the plane. Can the pilot successfully land the plane on that island? Or does this plane end up burning in the air? This is the story of South African Airways Flight 295. Listening to it will leave you astonished. So, make sure to watch the video until the end. Dark night of November 27, 1987. At Taoyuan International Airport in Taipei, Taiwan, a plane stands with 140 passengers and 19 crew members on board. South African Airways Flight 295, which was supposed to fly from Taipei to Johannesburg, South Africa, was destined for Jan Smuts International Airport, now known as O.R. Tambo International Airport, in Johannesburg. It was a long flight, taking approximately 10 hours to reach Mauritius. The Boeing 747-244 plane used for this flight was referred to as a Combi. Actually, this Boeing aircraft was one of those in which passengers and cargo, meaning their goods, were loaded on the same deck. Approximately 70% of this plane was designated for passengers, and the remaining portion was reserved for loading cargo. Flight 295 was under the command of 49-year-old Captain David Jacobus, who had accumulated a flying experience of 13,843 hours. Alongside David, the responsibility of the first officer rested on the shoulders of 37-year-old David Atwell, who had a flying experience of 7,362 hours. In the cabin, alongside the pilots, there was 45-year-old Giuseppe Joe Bellegarda, who held the position of flight engineer. He had an experience of 7,804 hours. Now, since this was going to be a very long flight, 37-year-old Jeffrey Burkle was present as the relief first officer, and as the relief flight engineer, 34-year-old Alan Daniel was also on board. After all the formalities, around 10:15 p.m., the process of pushing the plane towards the runway begins. And at around 10:25 p.m., the plane takes off from Taipei. The takeoff is very smooth, and within about half an hour, the plane reaches its cruising altitude. As planned, the plane follows the route, crossing Hong Kong, Bangkok, and Kuala Lumpur, and heading towards its destination. About 90 minutes after takeoff, the pilot contacts the routine radio station, ZUR, of South African Airways in Johannesburg. They update them on their position and the condition of the flight. Up to this point, everything is going perfectly, and there is no indication of any problem or difficulty with the plane. On the plane, everyone gets dinner and drinks, and then all passengers comfortably go to sleep. After that, the cabin crew also gets served dinner. However, from the audio recorded by the cockpit voice recorder, it is revealed that the pilots first sensed something amiss in the plane during dinner. And this was not a minor issue, it was a sign of a fire breaking out in the plane, identified first by flight engineer Giuseppe Joe Bellegarda. they inform the pilots that there is a fire in the plane's cargo, located just behind the passenger cabin. Now, since the cockpit voice recorder only records the last 30 minutes of the flight, it becomes evident that the plane had completed the initial approximately 7-hour journey before any issues occurred. Confirmation of this can also be found in the voice recordings of the conversation between the pilot and the Mauritius Air Traffic Control. The pilot had informed the Mauritius ATC about the fire on the plane, not the ATC of Thailand or Malaysia. But the question arises, if the pilots had their dinner more than 1.5 hours after takeoff, and if there was a fire in the plane at that time, how did the flight manage to continue for the last 30 minutes of its journey? Because if a fire breaks out in a plane, it usually takes just a few minutes to spread. In such a scenario, it would be next to impossible for a plane with a fire to continue flying for 6 consecutive hours. So, when did the fire break out on the plane? Was it half an hour before reaching Mauritius, or was it 1.5 hours after takeoff? This mystery remains unsolved to this day. But let's assume that the fire on the plane occurred half an hour before reaching Mauritius. Friends, making each of our videos requires a lot of hard work and expenses for trainee pilots, editors, and scriptwriters. Because of this, it is becoming very difficult for us to create regular videos. Let's continue to support each other, and our small channel will keep bringing you informative videos. So, with folded hands, I request you to please subscribe to the channel now. You might forget later. Please press the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon. Let's get back to our video. As soon as the cabin crew becomes aware of the fire on the plane, they immediately start exploring ways to understand and extinguish it. But before they can take any action, the fire causes a failure in the plane's electrical wiring. During this time, the pilots connect with the control tower in Mauritius to seek help and inform them about their condition. The plane's captain informs the ATC that due to the fire on the plane, they are reducing the altitude and descending to 14,000 feet. Upon hearing the pilot's statement, the air traffic controller immediately declares a full emergency. This time, the plane is 200 miles away from Mauritius. The plane's captain and the rest of the crew are well aware that they need to land at a nearby location as quickly as possible. Because typically, when there is a fire on a plane, the pilot has only about 20 minutes to land the plane. And because Mauritius was the closest location over the ocean where this plane was flying, the pilot attempted to reach there somehow. Now, the question is, how did the fire start in this plane? Well, the exact answer to this question has not been found by anyone to date. However, the reason behind it is believed to be the South African government. Now, why is that? Let me explain to you. In reality, during the year 1987, there was a fierce war going on between South Africa and its neighboring country, Angola. And the South African military needed a large quantity of weapons for the war. However, the problem was that there was an arms embargo imposed on South Africa at that time, meaning a prohibition on the trade of weapons. This means South Africa could not import weapons from other countries for its military. Now, in that situation, the South African government took a step that no one could have imagined. They began unlawfully contracting with arms dealers to transport weapons using commercial passenger aircraft. For this task, South African Airways was utilized to load weapons along with people's belongings onto planes and transport them from various locations worldwide to Africa. Yes, that's correct. People were unaware that the same planes they were traveling on were also transporting concealed weapons, including missiles, guns, and various highly flammable chemicals. In this way, the government was jeopardizing the lives of hundreds of passengers for its own purposes. Because transporting such weapons on commercial passenger aircraft is considered highly risky. In this venture, several top officials of this airline were involved, along with the South African government. Due to this, it was speculated that the fire in Flight 295 might have been caused by these weapons. Now, coming back to the story, the pilots sitting in the cockpit were still trying to gain control of the fire when they heard an alarm. This alarm meant that the smoke from the fire had entered the passenger compartment. And now the fire has started spreading rapidly ahead. As the pilots start to bring the plane down rapidly, passengers seated in the back begin to move forward to escape the smoke and heat. Chaos ensues inside the plane. A flight attendant bravely attempts to reach the back of the plane to extinguish the fire. But the intense heat prevents her from getting close to the flames. The pilots try turning off the recirculating fans to prevent the smoke from spreading further, but it doesn't make much difference. Many passengers succumb to carbon monoxide poisoning due to the smoke, and even those who survive are in deteriorating health. As the fire intensifies, each instrument in the cockpit shuts down one by one, and the pilot loses control of the plane. When the pilot doesn't understand something, they contact Mauritius ATC again, but even from there, they can't get any help, because the plane is still 150 miles away from Mauritius Airport. Time is running out quickly, and facing the rising smoke, the pilot makes a decision that you might have only seen in movies. Actually, the pilot, speaking to the flight attendant, opens the door while the plane is flying. Opening the door provides some relief to people inside the plane from the smoke, but it doesn't make a difference to the fire on the plane. The fire has now significantly weakened the plane's structure. The pilot tries their best, but despite their efforts, they are unable to take the plane to the airport. And at 4:07 in the morning, Flight 295, just 100 miles from Mauritius Airport, breaks into 3 pieces and sinks into the depths of the Indian Ocean. Unfortunately, no one survives this accident. The rescue team quickly arrives at the crash site, and the investigation of the incident begins. It's been 37 years since this tragedy occurred, but surprisingly, the reason for this event is still unknown to this day. Several mysteries related to this incident suggest that the truth about this event has been concealed by the South African government. Actually, when the investigation of this case took place, it was found that the records of the pilot's conversation with the radio station mentioned earlier, named ZUR, had already been erased. Let me tell you that ZUR is a 24/7 operating radio station operated by South African Airways. All conversations with different flights and pilots are recorded on this radio station. However, on November 27, 1987, the day when the incident with Flight 295 occurred, the recording for the entire day was missing from the station. Recordings from one day before and one day after were available, but not for that specific day. This strongly suggests that perhaps during the conversation between the pilot and the controller at ZUR, the pilot might have said something that led to the erasure of the record to hide it from the world. Not only that, but the flight's cargo manifest generated at Taibi Airport was also missing, meaning there was no information about what was loaded onto this plane from the airport, and directly accusing the South African government of erasing both of these pieces of evidence. Because if it came to light that the fire in the plane was caused by those weapons being illegally transported by the South African government in commercial passenger aircraft. In such a scenario, the South African government would be surrounded from all sides. Not only would South African Airways face severe repercussions, but a worldwide boycott of South Africa would also be initiated. Therefore, it is believed that the South African government erased the evidence related to this incident to save itself. Although this is just speculation because due to the lack of evidence, these accusations have never been proven. What do you think? Was there really any involvement of the South African government behind this incident? Share your opinion by commenting. That's it for today. Thank you for watching the video until the end.